Hey, my name is Ivy and welcome back to my channel. Not too long ago, I was doing as one does occasionally. I'm trying to get better about this, by the way. I was scrolling on Instagram. I saw a post from a friend on there, Freya. For those of you who don't already know, Freya is an amazing creator. They had posted about this palette that they had just received from a brand that I'd never heard of. The palette just stopped me in my tracks. I was like, what is that? Where can I get it? Rarely does that actually happen these days. Rarely does something kind of pull me in so quickly, so instantaneously, where I'm like, I absolutely have to know what the deal is with that and like, let me figure it out. Basically, I found out through Freya that it was from a indie Chinese makeup brand called Sugarock, which was founded by a Chinese drag queen. They are palettes that are, well, technically, we're gonna get into it in this video. Technically, these palettes are only available in China. And so immediately I sort of like hung my head in sadness, like Charlie Brown style, like doo 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 doo, and thought, well, you know, I guess that's the end of that. Then I saw that my friend Andromeda posted that they had ordered the palette and they were excited for it to arrive. I messaged Andromeda and they were very kind and sort of gave me enough information to kind of get started and understand the way that I could get the palette if I was really interested in it, but also was just like, hey, I can't take ownership of this for you. And, you know, I've had a lot of people kind of reach out to me about this process and I don't want to lead you astray. So like, here's some basic info. And if you're really interested, definitely check it out and see if, you know, see what you can do. They gave me enough of the information to get started, but then I had to do a little more of the legwork myself to figure it out. They told me they use a website called Superbuy to forward these products to them in the US. I had never heard of Superbuy. I really wasn't familiar with like mail forwarding services at all prior to this. This was my first foray into this experience. So I wanted to detail a little bit for you about how I went about getting this palette. Was it worth it? What was the experience like? I haven't seen a ton of this kind of content on YouTube. I've seen definitely some videos about how to use Superbuy, but they're very like basic. I'm hoping that this will give us makeup lovers a little more insight as to how it works and what you can expect if you use the website. To start, this is the palette. It did arrive. I think it arrived fully 1 month to the day that I ordered it. I ordered the palette on December 3rd and it arrived on January 3rd. Superbuy had actually told me in their delivery estimate that it would arrive on January 3rd. The palette is pretty incredible in terms of its packaging. I honestly find it very unique. The only kind of US based example that I can give that's similar is the Isamaya Beauty palettes. They're totally different in terms of texture and fabric. Like this is sort of like a plastic design on the front and then it's a velvet case. The Isamaya ones are, I think they're like, one is vinylish plastic and the other is metallic plastic. So they are very different, but like it's the only kind of comparison I can give. And then this is the palette on the inside. It really is a stunner. If you are into indie shadows, if you are into neutral tones, if you are into warm, grungy kind of tones, like this is such a beautiful color story. I love it. I was obsessed with it. It's like, it just sings to me. I was so excited that it arrived fully in one piece, which was of concern to me. So obviously when you're ordering anything internationally that you might order, there is concern about it arriving potentially damaged. There isn't really much you can do as far as ensuring that it won't arrive damaged, except that you can hope that it's packaged well, which it was, and I'll get into that a little bit. And then through Superbuy, there actually are a few add-ons as far as like kind of tracking and making sure that things are going well before it ships overseas to kind of keep eyes on how things are looking. So back to my story. So I messaged Andromeda, they gave me some basic information, and from there I went and took a look. So the actual palettes I found available to purchase were on Taobao. Taobao is, as I understand it, kind of the Chinese equivalent of Amazon/eBay. And they had a few palettes that were available through Taobao, but I could tell from the prices that some of them were in stock and available and at what I would deem a appropriate price, you know, like a for sale kind of price. And some of them were outrageously priced, which to me meant like they were sold out potentially, or I I'm not exactly sure. Like, for me, navigating Taobao is probably one of the most difficult parts. You can obviously Google Translate the site, which is in Chinese. It was still like a little bit difficult to gather, like, well, okay, why is this at this price and why is this at that price and whatever. But I was really only interested in this one palette. I just really, this was the one that I wanted. And because I guess Freya shared about it early enough in its release, it was still available. I then took that link, and I'm gonna put some screenshots on the screen for you guys to see sort of like how I navigated through the site. You copy the Taobao link and you put it into the Superbuy site. You put in the link and it brings up the item, and then their site helps convert the prices for you. So it can tell you, you know, here's your estimated price for the palette. It will only at that point give you a cost for the actual purchase of the palette. It won't actually give you final costs for the shipping. What I ended up paying up front is a little different than what I ended up paying overall. I sort of was able to view the item. I was able to tell how much it was going to cost. This is when I realized that I think what Andromeda did versus what I did are actually two different things through the same site. And this is what I mean when I say it can get a little confusing. There's the way that you can use Superbuy as an actual mail forwarding service, meaning if you're somehow able to purchase directly from Taobao, you can have something shipped to Superbuy and then have them forward it to you the rest of the way, so that it's kind of like you're shipping to them in China and then they forward it to you. And I think if you do that, it's actually a little less expensive than the way that I ended up doing it, which is using Superbuy as a purchasing agent. So that means that I literally had Superbuy buy the item for me from Taobao, ship it to their warehouse, and then ship it to me in the US. When you do it that way, you are paying for access to an agent, which I never ended up having to use. Like, I didn't have to converse with someone directly, but if there was a problem, I really legitimately would have had like a person that I could talk to. And so I think for that service, you do end up paying a little bit of a premium. Although again, I think overall, when you look at the total cost for the palette, especially considering how much I like it, I don't think it's too bad. That's what I did. So there, like I said, are I think two ways to kind of use the site, and one is a little more expensive and one is a little less expensive. But when you use Superbuy as a purchasing agent, it's really pretty simple. It's a few clicks and a few buttons, and then they do all of the hard work, heavy lifting for you. By the time you purchase the item through Superbuy, it will likely be very like in the middle of the night in China. So you may not have any updates on the status until the next day. What ended up happening from there is I was able to track the item and I was able to see it kind of move along its journey. There's a lot that you can see and do when it's actually within China. So they can send you photos of the box. They can send you, you can ask them to open it up and take pictures of the inside. So the process for it within China took a bit of time as far as like seeing it kind of move from purchasing to the warehouse, but not that long. I would say that part of the process moved really quickly. It wasn't until it sort of said like, oh, we've handed it off to your international shipper. That seemed like the bulk of time. So there was a while where there was no kind of travel service updates. It was over the holiday period, but I was aware of the fact that they had sort of estimated it'll take about a month to get to you based on what you've chosen as far as your shipper. When you go to purchase the item, they will give you a number of options as far as like what shippers they use and how much it costs. So if something, for whatever reason, were to be extremely important to you, that you get it much quicker, you can pay a premium to have it shipped much faster, but it does end up costing quite a lot of money, and I was not interested in doing that. So I think I chose either the least expensive or the second to least expensive option. There's also a bunch of different add-ons that you can get and pay for, like little extras, things you can ask them to do. I didn't go quite super duper bare bones, but I went pretty bare bones. I just wanted to see what the least amount I could pay was to use the service to get this item to me. It did take exactly 1 month to the day, and it did arrive exactly on the day that they estimated it would. So I feel like that part of their communication was really good. Also, the fact that I knew I had access to an agent if I needed to speak to someone, if I had concerns, did give me some peace of mind. I think especially if you were to use the site to buy something of a very high cost, this wasn't like super duper high cost. it would make me feel better to know that I had access to someone directly, because I feel like when you're dealing with all of this international communication in a language you don't speak or read, it can be very stressful when your like money is on the line. At that point, it was really, you know, once I ordered the item, it was in their hands. I was just kind of watching it go along its journey. And then for a while, I didn't really have any updates, and I was just kind of like, you know, waiting for it to show up. Pleasantly surprised when everything arrived, and it arrived on the date. And I'm going to insert some pictures and footage that I took when I actually unboxed the item. I was quite impressed with how it was shipped. The outermost box did have a little bit of damage to it. I mean, nothing super scary, but it was a little beat up. But then once I started to unbox it, there was a lot of really detailed packaging inside a big bubble inflated mailer, and then inside that there was a box, and then inside that box there was a bag, and inside that bag there was another box, and there was plastic. It was shrink wrapped. The actual palette itself was like tightly shrink wrapped, which I noticed is something pretty common when I've ordered anything from a Chinese makeup brand. Everything was extremely sturdy, well packaged, and well delivered. And that made me feel really good, because I honestly, since it was my very first experience doing anything this way, I had no idea what to expect, how intense or not intense the packaging might be, but it arrived beautifully. It was a joy to unbox. Obviously, it wasn't super environmentally friendly as far as how much packaging was there, the amount of plastic and all of that, but I also think that some of what was put in place was kind of mandatory for a package that would take a month to arrive. I know the biggest question that a lot of you are going to ask is, well, how much did it cost? This is where I think it gets a little bit tricky. As I said, it does seem like there are some different ways to use Superbuy that could impact your cost. But the easiest way for me to use it was just to have them wholesale buy the item for me and ship it to me. When I bought the original item, I think it was $68.87 or something along those lines. It was like around $68 to just purchase the item through Superbuy. So that included the cost of the palette and then the cost of Superbuy to actually purchase the item for me. And then once it figured out what the shipping costs were going to be, that ended up being about another $20 or so dollars. It ended up in total being $88 and some odd cents. Overall, this palette, this thing right here, this palette that has 12 shadows inside cost me $88-ish. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money for any palette. Certainly a palette of this size, it's a lot of money. I don't feel that the overall costs are unfair for the actual item and the cost to ship it. I do feel like at the end of the day, I'm not unhappy with what I received. I don't feel that it was extortionist to be able to get it. I think that it was a little expensive, but not unfair. However, it would take a lot for me to try to spend that amount of money again to get an item directly. I'd have to fall in love with something the way that I truly fell in love with this particular item in order to spend the extra money to get it directly. If you happen to have a friend in China that can order an item for you and help ship it to you for less money, definitely do that. This was a great way to be able to get something that I really wanted without having to go some other crazy route. And I, again, did not personally know about the existence of Superbuy prior to this experience. And that's why I wanted to make this video. I thought it would be really helpful to some of you who have seen some of these international indie makeup brands that you're interested in and have no idea where to start or what to do. I do think that the palette is unique. It's not going to work for everyone. I think that the mattes are super beautiful, pigmented. I found them pretty easy to blend. Of course, that's what I have on my eyes today. As you can see, I used a few of the mattes and 2 of the shimmers. And there's a really wide variety of textures within the palette. There are some slightly drier shimmer textures. There's some flakier, drier textures. But for the most part, I would say that the shimmers are actually quite almost like jelly-like. They're very, very wet. They're very, very smooth. They're very foily and metallic. They're beautiful. But if you have really oily eyelids and your makeup easily breaks up, I do have a feeling that these metallic, sparkly textures may not work for you. You know, of course, it looks beautiful, but you know, that you understand how it performs a little bit. I am only experiencing it on my face for the very first time today. So there's no way that I can give you fully fleshed out thoughts on the actual palette and how it performs and all of that. I'm really just giving you kind of my experience after I swatched it and then after my first experience putting it on my face. But putting it on my face was a joy. Like wearing this palette, putting it together, putting this eye look together was really fun. Gave me a really like fun and intense look. Love the shades in here. I just think that the way that the palette is put together, it's like a beautiful, kind of perfect, idyllic, neutral palette for me with some spicy stuff thrown in there, a spicy neutral palette. I have a feeling I know a few people who would be really into this. So now for some of the bad news. The bad news is that from what I can tell, this palette is sold out and only available through like repurchases or more increased price purchases from other websites, and it's not going to be restocked. And that seems to be a theme with some of these Chinese indie makeup brands, is things are limited run, and once they're gone, they're gone. I did see from a few people that shared it with me, and also I took a look, you can get this palette through AliExpress and you could get it shipped directly, but at a much higher cost. Honestly, I would not recommend that you spend that kind of money. I ended up spending $88 and that felt like a lot to me. I'm not saying I regret it. I do think it was worth it, but that was like upwards the highest end of what I would pay for something like this. The Sugarock palette, like I said, does have a lot of really beautiful and unique textures in it. I'm really excited to have it and play with it. But while most of it was just kind of pushing buttons and waiting for something to arrive to me, which really isn't that hard, it was still an increased cost to get it. And there is some risk involved. Like I said, it could have arrived damaged and then I really wouldn't have had much recourse or anything that I could do about it. I do feel terrible that I know a lot of you are probably going to fall in love and want to get it, and then I won't be able to help you. But I do think the best thing you can do is, if you're interested, keep eyes on Taobao, keep eyes on Superbuy, and then I definitely think this is a totally valid and helpful way to be able to gain access to those items without having a direct contact in China, which of course would be the best way. So I would definitely use Superbuy again if I really wanted to. With that, I want to say thank you for watching. If you did find this video helpful or enjoyable, I would love for you to give it a like before you leave it. And if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider subscribing and joining the channel. I would love to have you around. I'm gonna leave you with some beautiful swatches because why not? We all love swatches. As I develop further, more fully fleshed out thoughts around the palette, I will share them either on here or on Instagram or some combination of the two. I want to say thank you again, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.